Have you ever met someone and felt like you've known them forever? Or had a skill that just seemed to come naturally? What if those feelings aren't just quirks of fate, but echoes from a life you've already lived?
Welcome, 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 incredible listeners, to The Deep Dive. Today we're taking a truly extraordinary plunge into a topic that has, well, captivated humanity for millennia. It challenges everything we thought we knew about life, death, and, what truly comes next. Our sources for this deep dive are just brimming with revelations. One author even calls this subject spiritual dynamite. So get ready, because by the end of our conversation, your perspective on existence itself might just undergo a fascinating, maybe even fundamental shift. And hey, before we even properly jump in, if you're as excited as we are to explore these hidden depths and unlock surprising insights, make sure to like and subscribe and absolutely join our memberships. You'll get more deep dives that will definitely leave you buzzing.
Indeed. And our mission today for this particular deep dive is really to openly explore the most compelling and, like you said, truly mind-blowing aspects of reincarnation. We're drawing exclusively from the rich sources you've provided us. We're treating this not as, us saying this is fact, but more as an expansive journey, a journey into these profound questions about human existence, identity, and the frankly astonishing possibility of the continuity of consciousness. It's really a quest for understanding, guided only by the evidence and perspectives presented right here in these materials.
Exactly. Our approach is totally open-minded. We're just here to present the author's views and the fascinating evidence they've gathered, often meticulously. Our role isn't to judge, definitely not to dismiss these concepts. We want to lay out the incredible findings so that you, our curious listener, can connect the dots yourself, ponder the implications, and maybe, just maybe, have a few genuine aha moments. Our promise. To try and unravel these complex ideas, simply keep it engaging, entertaining, and maybe even a little bit awe-inspiring. So let's dive in, shall we? Okay, let's start with the basic concept because, honestly, despite how huge the implications are, it's quite simple at its core. Reincarnation. Essentially, it's the idea that the human personality, or maybe a fundamental part of the soul, let's say, survives physical death. And then maybe after some time, perhaps in a non-physical place, that essence gets associated with another physical body. Our sources don't present this as just one-off thing. It's more like a continuous journey, almost like a grand cosmic school for the soul.
And what's really striking is how one of our authors talks about the sheer revolutionary potential of this idea. They actually state, "Here at last is the indisputable proof that us humans have many lives and that our present life is just one link in a whole chain of past lives." Now, just think about that implication for a second. It's huge. They propose that once this idea has been totally accepted, there will be a complete revolution in our way of thinking about the world and ourselves. So it's not just positioned as a personal belief, it's presented as potentially causing a societal earthquake. If people really embrace this, it could fundamentally redefine purpose, justice, connection, even reality itself globally. It kind of invites us to see life not as just one short chapter, but as this ongoing epic story.
Right. And when we ask, okay, who actually believes this? It's really important to get that it's not just Southeast Asia, which is a common misconception in the West. Sure, Hindus and Buddhists there have emphasized it for ages in scriptures and teachings. But the belief is, frankly, astonishingly widespread. We're talking significant groups all over the world. Large groups of Shiite Muslims, like the Druse of Lebanon, there's about 500,000 of them, and reincarnation is core to their faith. Many people in West Africa and East Africa, too, even after Islam or Christianity came along, they still hold on to these ideas deeply. Then you've got a big minority in Brazil. It's this fascinating mix of African spiritual beliefs and French spiritualism from the 1800s. Really vibrant. And historically, if you look back, there's good evidence for it among ancient Celts, even groups like the Tlingit in North America. So it's genuinely this global tapestry, woven through countless cultures and centuries. It almost suggests some kind of universal human intuition about existence, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. And that broad historical and geographical spread naturally makes you wonder about its history within Western religion itself. It's often dismissed quite forcefully now in the West, but our sources suggest belief in reincarnation wasn't totally foreign to early Christianity. You have figures like Synesius, St. Ambrosia, Pope Gregory I, Jerome, Clement of Alexandria. These were influential early church fathers. And they apparently demonstrated some belief, or at least, an openness to the idea. Now, that's not saying everyone accepted it, definitely not. But it shows there was a debate back then within the early church. In fact, Emperor Justinian of Constantinople actively opposed it, even issued edicts against it, which kind of underlines the point. It was a known concept they were arguing about, not some totally alien idea just dropped in from the East. It hints at this sort of forgotten history of belief in the West.
Okay, so zooming out a bit to the philosophy behind it all, one idea that keeps popping up in these sources, and it's quite beautiful really, is Earth as a school of learning. It suggests that every single life, every incarnation, isn't just random, it's purposeful. It's an opportunity. An opportunity for what? Well, to learn, to become more understanding, more tolerant, and maybe above all, more loving. It's almost like we're all enrolled in this huge cosmic university, and the curriculum is basically compassion and evolving our spiritual selves. Gives a whole different meaning to the struggles and joys we face, doesn't it?
It really does. And tying right into that school of learning idea is the concept of the laws of karma. Now, this isn't presented as some, angry God punishing people, not at all. The sources explain it more as this elegant, self-correcting system for growth. The basic idea is that our actions, what we think, say, and do eventually circle back to us, creates a natural consequence. So this framework cleverly takes away the whole idea of unfairness in life's challenges. Instead of blaming other people or situations, understanding karma encourages deep self-reflection. You start asking, okay, what's the lesson here for me? What needs balancing within me? It acts like this continuous feedback loop, guiding the soul towards learning, towards ultimately higher states of being. It turns potential victimhood into a path for growth.
And the potential impact on society, if this became widely accepted, it feels huge, truly monumental. The author suggests that really embracing this knowledge of past and future lives could fundamentally shift how we see each other. Imagine a world where this belief is just, deeply ingrained. It could lead to genuinely seeing every person having equal rights, maybe even an end to discrimination. It encourages what the sources call a universal human mentality, pushing us beyond those tribal boxes we put ourselves in: religion, ethnicity, race, nationality. It's about recognizing this shared, continuous journey of all souls that could honestly transform our interactions, moving us from being separate islands to a truly connected global village. It's actually a really hopeful vision. Okay, so that's the philosophical foundation laid out. But then comes the big question for many of us. Where's the proof? Where's the evidence? And that leads us straight to the work of one particular man, Dr. Ian Stevenson. This is where you could say the rubber really meets the road, scientifically speaking. Our sources really emphasize his impeccable credentials. He was a respected academic and his incredibly rigorous methods as a researcher. Over 40 years, his systematic scientific digging into children's spontaneous past life memories gathered more than 2,600 cases. That's not just a handful of stories, it's a massive amount of data. The authors stress that his work is so solid, so respectable, it essentially gives level-headed Westerners permission to treat reincarnation as a serious subject. Even potentially accept it as verifiable, without feeling like they're betraying reason or science. That alone is a huge shift in how these ideas are often viewed.
Absolutely. And what's so compelling about Stevenson's approach is his laser focus on very young children, kids who spontaneously start remembering details from previous lives. He found these really consistent patterns across all these cases globally. The memories usually pop up between ages 2 and 4. That's before kids are heavily influenced by, external suggestions or leading questions. These children often describe this intense, almost confusing feeling of a double existence. They're trying to make sense of their current life and the life they remember so vividly. They might even talk about the past life in the present tense, like, I have a husband and 2 kids in Jaipur, or my other mom lives over there. And crucially, these memories tend to fade, usually between ages 5 and 8, which, interestingly, lines up with what psychologists call childhood amnesia. That specific timing, that window of remembering, adds another layer of fascinating consistency to his findings.
And here's where the evidence gets not just interesting, but honestly tangible. And yeah, maybe a little bit chilling. One of the most compelling pieces of objective evidence Dr. Stevenson documented was birthmarks and congenital defects, physical things. He consistently found that children who remembered violent deaths in previous lives often had birthmarks or even physical deformities that corresponded precisely to the fatal injuries they described from that past life. Just pause and think about that. A physical mark, a literal imprint on the new body, mirroring a trauma from a past life. It's a profound, almost undeniable link that really pushes the boundaries of our current medical and biological understanding.
Right, and this specific finding throws up a huge question mark for medical science as it stands. Stevenson's stats are pretty striking. They show that only about 30 to 60% of these kinds of birthmarks or defects can be explained by known medical causes, genetics, viruses, chemical exposure during pregnancy, things like that, which leaves this significant unexplained gap 40 to 70% of cases where there's just no conventional medical explanation. None. This led Stevenson to conclude that reincarnation, specifically the trauma from a past life's death carrying over, was the most plausible, most consistent explanation for these physical anomalies. It gives you truly objective and illustrative evidence that backs up the kids' verbal accounts, which can sometimes be fragmented. It really forces you to wonder about the mystery. How could impaired limbs or even limb amputations imprint themselves so precisely on a new body? What undiscovered laws of consciousness or energy might be governing this? Are these physical echoes somehow governed by karma, maybe reflecting unfinished business or lessons? It definitely stretches how we think about biology, mind, and the physical world.
Okay, let's step away from the statistics for a moment and dive into some of the actual cases. Because these aren't just numbers, they're powerful human stories that are genuinely astounding. They bring this whole concept to life. And we absolutely have to start with probably the most famous case, a real cornerstone of Stevenson's research, the incredible story of Shanti Devi. She was born in Delhi, India, back in 1926. And from a very young age, she started talking about a previous life in Mathura, a town miles away. She claims she was a woman named Lugdi who died in childbirth. And the details she gave were incredibly, startlingly specific. The story gets really dramatic when, finally, after Shanti Devi insisted, her family took her to Mathura. What happened there sounds like something out of a movie, really. An extraordinary family reunion spanning lifetimes. She immediately recognized her past life husband, Mr. Chobi, even though she'd never met him in this life, just picked him out. She spontaneously identified jewelry his new wife was wearing, saying, "Hey, that was mine," from her life as Lugdi. And then she just asked him straight up, "Didn't we agree that if one of us died, the other wouldn't remarry?" Apparently, Mr. Chobi just stared at the floor, totally speechless, clearly uncomfortable, which says a lot, right? She went on describing her old house with amazing accuracy. He mentioned a courtyard in the center, pointed out the specific well where she used to bathe. Can you imagine the shock, the certainty, the sheer impossibility of it all for everyone there? It's a story that just defies any simple explanation.
And what's truly profound in that Shanti Devi case is the depth of her recognition. It wasn't just recalling facts. When Mr. Chobi, who must have been reeling, asked her how she could possibly recognize her son, remember? The baby was only 9 days old when she died, as Lugdi Shanti's reply was just, "Wow, like wisdom speaking through a child." She said with total conviction, "He is my life. The life in me recognized the life in him." See, that's not just memory. It feels like a soul-level connection, an intuitive knowing. Deep stuff. And Mr. Chobi's conclusion, it seals it for many. He said, "No one other than my previous wife and myself could know all these things. This girl is my deceased wife, Lugdi. I am no longer in any doubt about it." That kind of personal, undeniable certainty based on verified, intimate details is incredibly powerful. It pushes way beyond coincidence.
So we have cases like Shanti Devi with incredible precision. But what about those violent deaths we mentioned earlier? These cases are often just as compelling, sometimes more so, because the cause of death often shows up physically or behaviorally, like an echo. Take the case of Rabi. He described the fatal accident of Chowki, the man whose life he remembered, in vivid detail, almost like he was reliving it. Even mentioned other episodes not likely to have been known outside his immediate family. Little details that were later checked and confirmed. He had this intense, almost obsessive interest in visiting Chowki's house and his uncle's house too, and he famously said he had 2 fathers. But here's the kicker, the bit that really connects the dots behaviorally. He developed this profound, debilitating phobia of cars, directly linked to the previous life's death in a car accident. That's a behavioral imprint that doesn't have an easy, logical explanation. Then there's Ismail Altankilig. This boy from really young insisted everyone call him Abit, the name of a man he remembered being. He didn't stop there. He showed incredible knowledge about Abbott's business dealings, naming specific people who owed Abbott money. And get this, some of those debtors actually paid the money back after Ismail named them. But maybe the most striking, the most visceral reaction was when Ismail learned that Abbott's murderers had been caught and hanged. He clapped with joy. A really powerful emotional and physical response tied directly to resolving a past life's trauma. A sense of justice finally served, you could say. And for a case that started incredibly early, pushing the limits of how young these memories can appear, think about Sevri Bayuri. This child started talking about her previous life before she was even 1 year old. Can you imagine being her parents? And adding another layer of weirdness, her father had what's called an announcing dream. In this dream, the deceased Abbott to Zulumi's bed. Yeah, the same Abbott from Ismail's case, suggesting this whole web of connections appeared to the father. And Abbott said he was sending a gift. When the father asked what gift, the dream Abbott replied, "The one who has come with you." It's almost like the soul was signaling its return, its identity.
even before the child could properly talk in her new life. Mind-ending stuff.
It's really important to acknowledge the high number of violent deaths in these cases. It's a pattern that keeps showing up in Stevenson's research. Our sources mention that out of 725 cases looked at across 6 different cultures, a massive 61% remembered past lives ending violently. Now, that figure is way, way higher than the rate of violent death in the general population. Of course, you could argue violent deaths make for stronger memories, maybe attract more attention. That's fair. But the sheer consistency of the details, the matching birthmarks we talked about, the behavioral patterns across such a huge number of cases, it adds significant weight. It stops being just a collection of weird stories and starts looking like a recurring, statistically significant pattern that really needs explaining beyond just coincidence or fantasy.
And it gets even more intriguing when you look at what the sources call promotion and demotion cases. These are where kids remember lives that were either much better off or much worse off, socioeconomically, than their current one. So you might get a child born into a wealthy family, remembering being, say, a poor farmer in a past life. Or the opposite, a child growing up poor, recalling being someone rich and powerful. This variety of experience across lives just adds another layer of complexity and fascination to it all.
Right, and this particular type of case really challenges some of the simpler psychological explanations people sometimes offer. Like, the common argument is maybe unhappy kids are just fantasizing about a better life to make themselves feel better, using these memories as an escape. But our sources kind of debunk that. They point out a few crucial things. First, those promotion cases where kids remember worse situations than their current one happen quite a lot, and they seem just as authentic and verifiable as the demotion cases. If it was just fantasy, why would a kid invent a harder past life? Makes no sense. Second, in many cultures where these cases pop up, kids get no credit for remembering a richer past. In fact, sometimes they're judged to have done something sinful in that past life to end up in their current, less wealthy situation. So any comfort they might get from fantasizing about being rich before is more than canceled by the trouble the subjects bring on themselves. Boasting, refusing the food they have now, complaining. But the absolute crucial point, the one that these psychological theories just can't explain, is this. How do these kids get hold of correct information about someone unknown to other members of their families? That's the key. The verifiable details about a specific person they couldn't possibly know. That's what sets these cases apart from just imagination or wishful thinking.
Okay, so moving beyond these incredible childhood memories and Dr. Stevenson's scientific work, our deep dive shows this whole continuum of existence, this soul's journey, seems to stretch even further. It's not just about young kids spontaneously remembering things. There are other fascinating ways these memories and connections seem to pop up. One of them is these things called announcing dreams. This is where someone who has died apparently communicates, maybe in a dream, to a future parent or family member, saying they want to be reborn into that family. Sometimes they even give specific details that later turn out to be true. It's like a kind of spiritual heads-up, a prearranged reunion across the veil almost.
Exactly. And that opens the door to an even wider range of evidence, including cases that involve mediumship or apparent past life regressions through hypnosis. Now, we definitely need a little caution here. It's important to note, as our sources do, that these kinds of cases can sometimes involve cryptomnesia.
Cryptomnesia, what's that exactly?
It's basically when you remember something you encountered before, maybe read in a book, saw in a movie, heard someone talk about, but you've consciously forgotten the source. So the memory feels new, original, maybe even like a past life memory, when it's actually just deeply buried recall.
Okay. Like unconscious plagiarism, almost, but with memories?
Kind of, yeah. Or it could just be fantasy, especially under hypnosis if it's not checked out really rigorously. However, our sources do present some cases from these areas that are so detailed, so verifiable, they seem to push beyond those simple explanations. They offer some truly incredible insights. Take the Anne Frank case involving a woman named Barbara Carlin. From when she was very young, Barbara had these uncanny feelings and memories related to Anne Frank. But the really astonishing part, on her very first visit to the Anne Frank house in Amsterdam as a child with her parents, she knew her way around. She even pointed out changes like saying the steps to the attic weren't the same and noticing that the movie star pictures Anne had pasted on the wall had been taken down and framed.
Wow. How could she possibly know that? Specific details about a house she'd never been to in another country.
Exactly. It's the kind of specific, verified detail that really defies coincidence or simple explanation. Then there's a fascinating case of Jeff, who believes he was the Confederate Civil War General John B. Gordon. When Jeff was reading about Gordon's war injuries, getting shot multiple times, specific locations like his hand, shoulder, leg, face, he had this incredibly strong visceral emotional reaction, tears streaming down his face like he was feeling the pain himself. And then he saw a photograph of Brigadier General John B. Gordon. Jeff's reaction was immediate and personal. "Familiar face to me. I know it well. I shave his sideburns every day."
He recognized himself.
Apparently so. That striking facial resemblance, combined with the deep emotional connection and the specific knowledge of the wounds, it paints a pretty vivid picture of a possible past life connection. And these patterns aren't just military figures. There are intriguing cases suggesting artists are reborn, almost picking up their creative work where they left off. Consider Peter Teekamp. He's an artist identified by some sources as the reincarnation of the famous painter Paul Gauguin. What's remarkable is that Teekamp apparently produced early paintings that looked uncannily like Gauguin's sketches before he'd ever actually seen Gauguin's work.
Seriously.
Well, the sources suggest it shows how we rebuild the achievements of the previous incarnation. Like the talent, the impulse is still there. Similarly, Alexandra Nachita, who became famous internationally as a child prodigy artist, has been identified as possibly being Picasso reincarnated. She showed this incredible precocity and a style that really resonated with Picasso's. These cases suggest that deep talents, passions, maybe even styles can actually carry over across lifetimes. What's also really fascinating in our sources is this idea of groups of souls reincarnating together, almost like a team or maybe a drama troupe coming back to continue shared work or resolve old issues. Through a spiritual source named Atun Ray, this is channeled information, so it's a different type of evidence than Stevenson's empirical work, more esoteric, but the details given are often strikingly specific. Some really interesting matches have been proposed for historical figures. For instance, Ralph Nader, the American consumer advocate, he's identified as someone named Thomason from the American Revolution's Continental Congress. And apparently the facial features are remarkably similar.
So it's not just appearance, but maybe a continuation of purpose, like fighting for justice across centuries.
That seems to be the implication, yeah. A drive for societal change carrying over. And get this connection. President Abdul Kalam of India, the respected scientist and former president, identified as the reincarnation of Tipu Sultan. He was an 18th century ruler in India, known for being a military innovator, especially with rockets. The sources recount this story where Kalam visited a NASA exhibit, saw stuff about early rocket technology, apparently had this profound feeling of recognition, like a personal proof reflecting on his own contribution to rocket technology, which he invented more than 200 years ago, connecting him intuitively right back to Tipu Sultan.
Wow, so not just talent carrying over, but almost an inner knowing of past achievements.
That's what the source suggests, this deep internal resonance, and the connections keep coming. Edwin Booth, a famous 19th century American actor, is identified as Amitabh Bachchan, the huge modern Indian film star, and Booth's first wife, Mary Devlin, identified as Rekha, who was Bachchan's frequent co-star in many films.
A couple reunited across time and continents.
That's the suggestion. The sources mention obvious physical similarities too, plus the shared profession, suggesting a couple continuing their connection, and linking history and Hollywood. Robert Todd Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's son, identified as Steven Spielberg.
Spielberg, how's that connection made?
The sources note the Lincoln family loved theater, and they suggest what better way for a soul connected to that influential family to impact mass consciousness today than through cinema. They also point out a strong resemblance, end quote. These cases, even though they come from a channeled source, weave this incredible narrative of souls' continuing journeys, relationships, and even specific talents across vast stretches of time and geography.
Okay, now for a really unique and complex case study. This one involves what the sources call far memories. So this isn't just kids remembering things. It's about persistent, deep memories, sometimes even physical feelings, that pop up much later in life, often with astonishingly verifiable details. Let's talk about Mrs. Smith and Dr. Arthur Girdham. Their work together tells this absolutely fascinating story involving the Cathars.
Ah, yes, the Cathars, a Christian group in 13th century France, considered heretics by the church and brutally suppressed.
Exactly. So Mrs. Smith was a patient of Dr. Girdham's. She had these persistent far memories and really intense nightmares starting when she was just 13. She developed this deep, inexplicable fear of the city of Toulouse, She remembered a terrifying dream of running away from its St. Etienne Cathedral during a time of persecution. And what's incredible is Mrs. Smith knew basically nothing about the Cathars historically, nothing about their beliefs or persecution. Yet she recalled their rituals and the events of that time in precise detail. It was like these ancient memories were just buried deep inside her, bubbling up.
And what makes this case so compelling is how these fragments, these seemingly random memories, lined up perfectly with actual historical records, which Dr. Girdham then painstakingly researched. Mrs. Smith associated herself with specific people from that past life, like a man named Roger Izarn, who she said was her brother, and a woman named Helis, or Alay, who history records as a known protector of Cathar heretics. She even remembered specific dress codes. The Cathar perfects wore gray clothes before Roger's death, black after, and white when they were being taken to be burned at the stake. Details later confirmed in historical texts.
Wow. That's specific.
But here's the bit that's just astonishing, the part that really challenges any conventional explanation. A historian specializing in the Cathars, Professor Nelly, asked Mrs. Smith if she remembered any poetry from the 13th century. And she did. She recalled bits of a poem, including lines about a silver-studded girdle, the seemingly obscure detail. It was later found in a poem by Raimbeau de Vaqueras, a troubadour from exactly the right historical period, 1155 to 1205.
No way. How could you possibly know that?
Exactly. That level of specific, verifiable detail coming from someone with zero historical knowledge beforehand, it's truly remarkable, profoundly challenging to explain away. It's like this vivid tapestry of forgotten history woven right into a modern mind, strongly suggesting a direct personal link across centuries.
Okay, so we've journeyed through so much evidence, from Dr. Stevenson's rigorous science and those compelling childhood memories to the more, let's say, esoteric channeled accounts and these incredible far memories.
Yeah.
But what does it all mean in the bigger picture? What's the deeper purpose behind this incredible, seemingly continuous journey of the soul?
Well, if we try to connect the dots based on the broader spiritual narrative presented in our sources, it points towards soul evolution. It's presented as a purposeful path, definitely not just a random cycle of birth and death. Our sources suggest souls actually choose their next life, often in collaboration with spiritual guides. That implies some kind of oversight, maybe a curriculum designed for learning. And even more profoundly, there's this idea that the great leaders of mankind like Buddha, Moses, Jesus, Krishna, and others existed before the creation of our universe.
Before the universe, wow.
Yeah. These highly evolved souls, the sources say, agreed to reincarnate into physical life, choosing to take human form to help guide and uplift humanity. It suggests this grand unfolding spiritual plan, maybe orchestrated by beings of immense wisdom and compassion.
So what is the soul then in this view? How do they describe it?
Simply yet powerfully as a dynamic energy structure. That's the real essence of who we are. Humans, then, are kind of like a holographic projection of that soul into a physical body for a time. And this core essence, sometimes called a monad in spiritual traditions, is described beautifully using the analogy of a prism.
A prism. How so?
Like a prism takes white light and refracts it into all the unique colors of the spectrum. This monad takes the universal divine energy and refracts it, creating the unique qualities, experiences, and personality traits that make each of us distinct in every life.
That's a great image, our individuality coming from a single universal source.
Exactly. And building on that, the sources touch on concepts like the 7 rays, which some traditions use to describe different soul types or spiritual paths. But importantly, for clarity, our sources specify that human souls, at least the ones evolving on Earth right now, are only reincarnated as humans. The idea of maybe having past lives as animals, which you find in some beliefs, is noted here as something that happened eons ago and is no longer happening for souls currently in the human cycle on our planet.
Oh, okay. So it provides more focused picture for the human soul's journey right now.
Right. It focuses on human-to-human reincarnation as the main path for our collective evolution at this stage.
And the ultimate goal. In this huge cosmic story of reincarnation, what are we aiming for?
The sources consistently point to the soul's deep, fundamental yearning to be in union with God, or whatever term you use for the divine source. They also present this poignant idea that being too deeply immersed in biological life in the physical world can lead to the loss of conscious connection with God. It's not seen as a punishment, more like a natural consequence of the density and distractions of physical existence.
Makes sense. It's easy to get caught up.
Very easy. They use the beautiful parable of the vine. Individual leaves representing souls are part of the vine representing God. But when we incarnate, take physical form, it can feel like those leaves falling from a branch, a temporary but sometimes profound sense of separation. And it's that feeling of separation that fuels the soul's innate desire to return, to reconnect consciously with its source. It's essentially a journey back home played out over many lifetimes. And this whole journey, according to our sources, leads towards a kind of spiritual perfection, a mastery. They introduce this concept of 5 initiations for a soul nearing the end of its earth journey. Jesus' life is often used as an example to illustrate these stages. These aren't just symbolic. They represent real shifts in consciousness, mastery over the challenges of human life. They usually happen in the last few lifetimes here. The first is birth, not just physical birth, but a spiritual awakening, where the soul really takes charge, directing the personality towards spiritual goals over purely material ones. Second is baptism. This signifies the soul overcoming illusion, seeing reality more clearly, spiritually, shedding false ideas. Third is transfiguration on the mountain here. The soul is in complete control. The person lives fully guided by their higher self, expressing their true potential.
Okay, sounds like stages of increasing spiritual awareness and control.
Precisely. The fourth stage, often symbolized by the crucifixion, is about letting go of the last ties to material life, focusing entirely on spiritual realities, often involving making significant sacrifices for the good of humanity. And finally, the fifth is resurrection. This represents becoming a body of light, transcending physical limits. It usually marks the end of the soul's required journey on Earth. At this point, the perfected soul apparently has a choice of 7 different paths forward, leading to a new, joyful journey, maybe in another universe, free from earthly pain and suffering, continuing its evolution on an even grander scale. It's a pretty magnificent vision of spiritual achievement.
That's fascinating. And it's also really interesting how belief itself might affect this whole process.
Yeah.
The sources suggest that just believing in reincarnation might actually be carried over from one life to another.
Yeah.
Not like a specific memory of believing, but maybe more like an intuition, a mental set, like a background readiness to understand it.
Right, like a pre-existing framework.
Exactly. And this framework, this openness, could actually help a child who starts having past life memories, make sense of them, fit them into a coherent picture. Whereas a child without that framework, without that intuitive leaning, might just dismiss the memories, maybe unconsciously suppress them because they don't fit their understanding of reality. The memories just fade away.
Yeah, it suggests the belief itself could act almost like a channel, either helping or hindering the recall of past lives. And this entire body of evidence we've talked about, from Stevenson's careful studies to all these diverse cases, it really throws down a gauntlet to the conventional scientific view of mind and brain. Most neuroscientists today operate on the assumption that mind, consciousness, memory, it's all just brain activity, a product of physical stuff, full stop. But as our sources argue pretty strongly, the data from observations of paranormal phenomena, like all these reincarnation cases, require a radical revision of how we currently think about the mind-body relationship. The sheer volume, the abundant evidence of paranormal phenomena suggests that maybe instead of just dismissing it because it doesn't fit the current model, scientists should perhaps change their minds, or at least consider the data more favorably. It really calls for an expansion of our scientific worldview, urging us to look beyond just the physical and consider that consciousness might have a non-physical aspect that can actually endure beyond the brain.
Wow. Okay. We have covered some truly profound and, yeah, I have to say it again, utterly mind-blowing ground today on the deep dive. From seeing how widespread belief in reincarnation is globally, to digging into Dr. Stevenson's meticulous research and hearing those astonishing, verifiable stories like Shanti Devi, Rabi, Mrs. Smith, and the Cathars. We've really only scratched the surface of what's in these incredible sources. We've touched on how violent deaths might leave physical marks, how souls might choose their next lives purposefully, this whole idea of a spiritual curriculum playing out over lifetimes, guiding us toward growth and union. Our aim was just to present the author's views and the compelling evidence openly, without judgment, letting you weigh the possibilities. And we really hope we've done that, leaving you with, well, a lot to think about.
Definitely. And if we try to connect all these threads back to the big picture, I'd like to leave you, our listener, with a final thought. It's pretty provocative. Just stop for a moment. Reflect. What would the world truly be like if reincarnation wasn't just a belief, but became an accepted, undeniable reality of life for everyone? How would that change how we treat each other? Seriously. When you're dealing with your family, your friends, even strangers you just meet briefly, you'd have to start asking some deep questions, wouldn't you? Like, who is this soul in front of me? What history might we share that I don't even consciously know about? This planet really has become a global village, and maybe now, more than ever, we all need to shift our thinking. Move from just me to WE, move from seeing them to seeing US. Perhaps this potential knowledge of our interconnected, multi-lifetime journey could nudge us towards a more gentle, more understanding, truly compassionate approach in everything we do.
That is a powerful and a beautiful thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the incredible enigma of reincarnation. We genuinely hope you'll continue exploring these fascinating ideas on your own. Maybe seek out some of these sources we've touched on and just ponder how this knowledge, or even just the possibility of it, might change your own outlook on life, on others, on the very fabric of existence. We've had a fantastic time exploring this huge topic with you today. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and definitely think about joining our membership community for more deep dives into amazing subjects like this one. Until next time, keep digging deeper, keep asking those big questions, and keep being absolutely amazing.